Deep in the pool. On the morning of the third day, the sea calmed. Even the most delicate passengers, those who had not been seen around the ship since sailing time, emerged from the cabins and crept on the sun deck where the deck steward gave them chairs and tucked rugs around their legs and left them lying in rows, their faces upturned to the plain, almost heatless January sun.
It had been moderately rude the first 2 days, and this sudden calm and the sense of comfort that it brought created a more genial atmosphere over the whole ship. By the time evening came, the passengers, with 12 hours of good weather behind them, were beginning to feel confident, and at 8 o'clock that night the main dining room was filled with people eating and drinking, with the assured, complacent air of seasoned sailors.
The meal was not half over when the passengers became aware, by the slight friction between their bodies and the seats of their chairs, that the big ship had actually started rolling again. It was very gentle at first, just a slow, lazy leaning to one side, then to the other, but it was enough to cause a subtle, immediate change of mood over the whole room. A few of the passengers glanced up from their food, hesitating, waiting, almost listening for the next roll, smiling nervously, little secret glimmers of apprehension in their eyes. Some were completely unruffled, some were openly smug, a number of the small ones making jokes about food and weather in order to torture the few who were beginning to suffer. The movement of the ship then became rapidly more and more violent, and only 5 or 6 minutes after the first roll had been noticed, she was swinging heavily from side to side, the passengers bracing themselves in the chairs, leaning against the pool as in a car cornering.
At last the really bad roll came, and Mr. William Bonneville, sitting at the purser's table, saw his plate of poached turbot with hollandaise sauce sliding suddenly away from his fork. There was a flutter of excitement, everybody reaching for plates and wine glasses. Mr. Renshaw, sitting at the purser's right, gave a little scream and clutched the gentleman's arm. Going to be a dirty night, the purser said, looking at Mr. Renshaw. I think exploding up for a very dirty night. There was just the faintest suggestion of relish in the way he said it.
A steward came hurry up and sprinkled water on the tablecloth between the plates. The excitement subsided. Most of the passengers continued with their meal. A small number, including Mrs. Renshaw, got carefully to their feet and threaded their way with a kind of concealed haste between the tables and through the doorway. Well, the purser said, there she goes. He gazed around with approval at the remainder of his flock who were sitting quiet, looking complacent, their faces reflecting openly that extraordinary pride that travelers seem to take in being recognized as good sailors.
When the eating was finished and the coffee had been served, Mr. Bonneville, who had been unusually grave and thoughtful since the rolling started, suddenly stood up and carried his cup of coffee around to Mr. Renshaw's vacant place, next to the purser. He seated himself in her chair, then immediately leaned over and began to whisper urgently in the purser's ear. Excuse me, he said, but could you tell me something, please?
The purser, small and fat and red, bent forward to listen. What's the trouble, Mr. Bonneville? What I want to know is this. The man's face was anxious and the purser was watching it. What I want to know is will the captain already have made his estimate on the day's run? You know, for the auction pool. I mean, before it began to get raw like this.
The purser, who had prepared himself to receive a personal confidence, smiled and leaned back in his seat to relax his full belly. I should say so, yes, he answered. He didn't bother to whisper his reply, although automatically he lowered his voice, as one does when answering a whisper. About how long ago do you think he did it? Sometime this afternoon. He usually does it in the afternoon. About what time? Oh, I don't know. Around 4 o'clock, I should guess. Now tell me another thing. How does the captain decide which number it should be? Does he take a lot of trouble over that?
The purser looked at the anxious, frowning face of Mr. Bodible, and he smiled, knowing quite well what the man was driving at. Well, you see, the captain has a little conference with the navigating officer, and they study the weather and a lot of other things, and then they make their estimate. Mr. Bodible nodded, pondering this answer for a moment. Then he said, "Do you think the captain knew there was bad weather coming today?"
I couldn't tell you, the purser replied. He was looking into the small black eyes of the other man, seeing the two single little spark of excitement dancing in the centers. I really couldn't tell you, Mr. Bodival. I wouldn't know. If this get any worse, it might be worth buying some of the low numbers. What do you think? The whispering was more urgent, more anxious now.
Perhaps it will, the purser said. I doubt whether the old man allows for a really rude night. It was pretty calm this afternoon when he made his estimate. The others at the table had become silent and were trying to hear, watching the purse with that intent. Half cooked, listening look that you can see also at the racetrack when they are trying to overhear a trainee talking about his chance. The slightly open lips, the upstretched eyebrows, the head forward and cocked a little to one side, that desperately strained, half hypnotized. Listening look that comes to all of them when they are hearing something straight from the horse's mouth.
"Now, suppose you were allowed to buy a number, which one would you choose today?" Mr. Bodible whispered. "I don't know what the range is yet," the purser patiently answered. "They don't announce the range till the auction starts after dinner, and I'm really not very good at it anyway. I'm only the purser, you know." At that point, Mr. Bodible stood up. "Excuse me all," he said, and he walked carefully away over the swaying floor between the other tables, and twice he had to catch hold of the back of a chair to steady himself against the ship's row. "The sun deck, please," he said to the elevator man.
The wind caught him full in the face as he stepped out on the open deck. He staggered and grabbed hold of the rail and held on tight with both hands. And he stood there looking out over the darkening sea where the great waves were welling up high and white horses were riding against the wind with plumes of spray behind them as they went. "Pretty bad out there, wasn't it, sir?" the elevator man said on the way down. Mr. Bodival was combing his hair back into place with a small red comb. "Do you think we've slacked speed at all on account of the weather?" he asked.
"On my word, yes, sir. We slack off considerable since this start. You got to slack off speed in weather like this or you will be throwing the passengers all over the ship." Down in the smoking room, people were already gathering for the auction. They were grouping themselves politely around the various table, the men a little stiff in their dinner jackets, a little pink and overshaped and stiff beside their cold white-armed women. Mr. Bodible took a chair close to the auctioneer's table. He crossed his leg, folded his arm, and settled himself in his seat with the rated spare air of a man who has made a tremendous decision and refused to be frightened.
The pool, he was telling himself, would probably be around $7,000. That was almost exactly what it had been the last 2 days, with the numbers selling for between 300 and 400 apiece. Being a British ship, they didn't in pounds, but he liked to do his thinking in his own currency. $7,000 was plenty of money. My goodness, yes! And what he would cash, he would get them to pay him in $100 bills, and he would take it ashore in the inside pocket of his jacket. No problem there. And right away, yes, right away, he would buy a Lincoln convertible. He would pick it up on the way from the ship and drive it home just for the pleasure of seeing Ethel's face when she came out the front door and looked at it. Wouldn't that be something? to see Edel's face when he glided up to the door in a brand new pale green Lincoln convertible. "Hello, Edel, honey," he would say, speaking very casual. "I just thought I'll get you a little present. I saw it in the window as I went by. So I thought of you and how you were always wanting one. You like it, honey?" he would say. "You like the color?" And then he would watch her face.
The auctioneer was standing up behind his table now. "Ladies and gentlemen," he shouted, "the captain has estimated the day's run, ending middle tomorrow, at 515 miles. As usual, we will take the 10 numbers on either side of it to make up the range. That makes it 505 to 525. And, of course, for those who think the true figure will be still farther away, there'll be low field and high field, sold separately as well. Now, we'll draw the first number out of the hat. Here we are, 512.
The room became quiet. The people sat still in their chairs, all eyes watching the auctioneer. There was a certain tension in the air, and as the bids got higher, the tension grew. This wasn't a game or a joke. You could be sure of that by the way one man would look across at another who had raised his bid, smiling perhaps, but only the lips smiling, the eyes bright and absolutely cool. Number 512 was knocked down for 110 pounds. The next 3 or 4 numbers fetched roughly the same amount. The ship was rolling heavily, and each time she went over, the wonder paneling on the walls creaked as if it were going to sleep. The passengers held onto the arms of their chairs, concentrating upon the auction. "Low field," the auctioneer called out. "The next number is low field."
Mr. Bordeaux sat up very straight and tense. He would wait, he had decided, until the others had finished bidding. Then he would jump in and make the last bid. He had figured that there must be at least $500 in his account at the bank at home, probably near 6. That was about 200 pounds, over 200. This ticket wouldn't fetch more than that. "As you all know," the auctioneer was saying, "low field covers every number below the smallest number in the range. In this case, every number below 505. So, if you think this ship is going to cover less than 505 miles in the 24 hours ending at noon tomorrow, you better get in and buy this number. So, what am I bid?" It went clear up to 130 pounds. Others besides Mr. Bordeaux seemed to have noticed that the weather was raw. 140, 50, there it stopped. The auctioneer raised his hammer.
"Going at 150? 60, Mr. Bordeaux called, and every face in the room turned and looked at him. 70, 80, Mr. Bordeaux called. 90, 200, Mr. Bordeaux called. He wasn't stopping now, not for anyone. There was a pause. "Any advance on 200 pounds? Sit still," he told himself. "Sit absolutely still and don't look up. It's unlucky to look up. Hold your breath. No one's going to beat you up so long as you hold your breath."
Going for 200 pounds. The auctioneer had a pink ball held, and there were little bits of sweet sparkling on top of it. Going. Mr. Bordeaux held his breath. Going. Gone. The man banged the hammer on the table. Mr. Bordeaux wrote out a check and handed it to the auctioneer's assistant. Then he settled back on his chair to wait for the finish. He did not want to go to bed before he knew how much there was in the pool.
They added it up after the last number had been sold, and it came to 2,100 odd pounds. That was around $6,000. 90% to go to the winner, 10% to the Siemens charities. 90% of 6,000 was 5,400. Well, that was enough. He could buy the Lincoln convertible, and there would be something left over, too. With this gratifying thought, he went off, happy and excited, to his cabin.
When Mr. Bonneville woke the next morning, he lay quite still for several minutes with his eyes shut, listening for the sound of the gale, waiting for the roll of the ship. There was no sound of any gale, and the ship was not rolling. He jumped out and peered out of the porthole. The sea, oh, Jesus God, was smooth as glass. The great ship was moving through it fast, obviously making up for time lost during the night. Mr. Bonneville turned away and sat slowly down on the edge of his bunk. A fine electricity of fear was beginning to prickle under the skin of his stomach. He hadn't a hope now. One of the higher number was certain to win it after this. Oh, my God, he said aloud. What shall I do?
What, for example, would Ethel say? It was simply not possible to tell her that he had spent almost all their 2 years saving on a ticket in the ship's pool, nor was it possible to keep the matter secret. To do that, he would have to tell her to stop drawing checks. And what about the monthly installments on the television set and the Encyclopedia Britannica? Already he could see the anger and the contempt in the woman's eyes, the blue becoming gray, and the eyes themselves narrowing as they always did when there was anger in them. Oh my God, what shall I do?
There was no point in pretending that he had the slightest chance now. Not only is the good and ship's daughter to go backwards. They had to put her in reverse and go full speed astern and keep right on going if he was to have any chance of winning it now. Well, maybe he should ask the captain to do just that. Offer him 10% of the profits. Offer him more if he wanted it. Mr. Bonneville started to giggle. Then, very suddenly he stopped, his eyes and mouth both opening wide in a kind of shocked surprise. For it was at this moment that the idea came.
It hit him hard and quick, and he jumped up from his bed, terribly excited, ran over the porthole and looked out again. Well, he thought, why not? Why ever not? The sea was calm and he wouldn't have any trouble keeping afloat until they picked him up. He had a vague feeling that someone had done this thing before, but that didn't prevent him from doing it again. The ship would have to stop and lower a boat, and the boat would have to go back maybe half a mile to get him, and then it would have to return to the ship. The whole thing. An hour was about 30 miles. It will now 30 miles off the day's run. That will do it. Low field. We'll be sure to win it then.
Just so long as he made certain someone saw him falling over, but that would be simple to arrange. And he better wear light clothes, something easy to swim in. Sport clothes, that was it. He would dress as though he were going up to play some deck tennis, just a shirt and a pair of shoes, and tennis shoes, and leave his watch behind. What was the time? 9:15. The sooner the better. Then, do it now and get it over with. Have to do it soon, because the time limit was midday.
Mr. Bonneville was both frightened and excited when he stepped out on the sun deck in his sports clothes. His small body was wide at the hips, tapering upward to extremely narrow sloping shoulders, so that it resembled, in shape at any rate, a bollard. His white skinny legs were covered with black hairs, and he came cautiously out on deck, treading softly in his tennis shoes. Nervously, he looked around him. There was only one other person inside, an elderly woman with very thick ankles and immense buttocks, who was leaning over the rail staring at the sea. She was wearing a coat of Persian lamb, and the collar was turned up so Mr. Bonneville couldn't see her face.
He stood still, examining her from a distance. Yes, he told himself. She was probably due. She would probably give the alarm just as quickly as anyone else. But wait 1 minute. Take your time. William Bonneville, take your time. Remember what you told yourself a few minutes ago in the cabin when you were changing. Do you remember that?
The thought of leaping off a ship into the ocean 1,000 miles from the nearest land and made Mr. Bonneville a cautious man at the best of times, unusually at birth. He was by no means satisfied yet that this woman he saw before him was absolutely certain to give the alarm when he made his jump. In his opinion, there were two possible reasons why she might fail him.
Firstly, she might be deaf and blind. It was not very probable, but on the other hand, it might be so, and why take a chance? All he had to do was check it by talking to her for a moment beforehand. Secondly, and this will demonstrate how suspicious the mind of a man can become when it's working through self-preservation and fear. Secondly, it had occurred to him that the woman might herself be the owner of one of the high numbers in the pool, and as such would have a second financial reason for not wishing to stop the ship. Mr. Bodible recalled that people had killed their fellows for far less than $6,000. It was happening every day in the newspapers. So why take a chance on that either? Check on it first. Be sure of your facts. Find out about it by a little polite conversation. Then, provided that the woman appeared also to be a pleasant, kindly human being, the thing was a cinch and he could leap overboard with a light heart.
Mr. Bodible advanced casually towards the woman and took up a position beside her, leaning on the rail. "Hello," he said pleasantly. She turned and smiled at him, a surprisingly lovely, almost a beautiful smile. Also, the face itself was very plain. "Hello," she answered him. "Check," Mr. Bodible told himself, on the first question. "She is neither blind nor deaf." "Tell me," he said, coming straight to the point. "What do you think of the auction last night?" "Auction?" she asked, frowning. "Auction? What auction?"
You know, that silly old thing they have in the lounge after dinner, selling numbers of the ship daily run. I just wonder what you thought about it." She shook her head, and again she smiled, a sweet and pleasant smile that had in it perhaps the trace of apology. "I'm very lazy," she said. "I always go to bed early. I have my dinner in bed. It's so restful to have dinner in bed." Mr. Bodible smiled back at her and began to edge away. "Got to go and get my exercise now," he said. "Never miss my exercise in the morning. It was nice seeing you, very nice seeing you." He retreated about 10 paces, and the woman let him go without looking around.
Everything was now in order. The sea was calm. He was lightly dressed for swimming. There were almost certainly no man-eating sharks in this part of the Atlantic, and there was this pleasing, kindly old woman to give the alarm. It was a question now only of whether the ship would be delayed long enough to swing the balance in his favor. Almost certainly it would. In any event, he could do a little to help in that direction himself. He could make a few difficulties about getting hauled up into the lifeboat, swim around a bit, back away from them surreptitiously as they tried to come up close to fish him out. Every minute, every second gained would help him win. He began to move forward again to the rail, but now a new fear assailed him.
Will he get caught in the propeller? He heard about that happening to persons falling off the sides of big ships. But then, he wasn't going to fall. He was going to jump. And that was a very different thing. Provided he jumped out far enough, he would be sure to clear the propeller. Mr. Bodible advanced slowly to a position at the rail about 20 yards away from the woman. She wasn't looking at him now. So much the better. He didn't want her watching him as he jumped off. So long as no one was watching, he would be able to say afterwards that he had slipped and fallen by accident. He peered over the side of the ship. It was a long, long drop. Come to think of it now, he might easily hurt himself badly if he hit the water flat.
Wasn't there someone who once split his stomach open that way, doing a belly flop from a high dive? He must jump straight and land feet first, going like a knife. Yes, sir. The water seemed blue and deep and gray, and it made him shiver to look at it. But it was now or never. Be a man, William Butterball, be a man. All right then, now, here goes. He climbed up onto the wide wooden top rail, stood there poised, balancing for 3 terrifying seconds. Then he leapt. He leapt up and out as far as he could go, and at the same time he shouted, "Help!
Help! Help! He shouted as he fell. Then he hit the water and went under. When the first shout for help sounded, the woman who was leaning on the rail started up and gave a little jump of surprise. She looked around quickly and saw sailing past her through the air this small man dressed in white shirts and tennis shoes, spread eagle and shouting as he went. For a moment she looked as though she weren't quite sure what she ought to do. Through a life belt, run away and give the alarm, or simply turn and yell. She drew back a pace from the rail and swung half around facing up to the bridge. And for this brief moment she remained motionless, tense, undecided.
Then, almost at once, she seemed to relax, and she leaned forward far over the rail, staring at the water where it was turbulent in the ship's wake. Soon, a tiny round black head appeared in the foam. An arm was raised above it, once, twice, vigorously waving, and a small faraway voice was heard calling something that was difficult to understand. The woman leaned still farther over the rail, trying to keep the little moving black speck inside. But soon, so very soon, it was such a long way away that she couldn't even be sure it was there at all.
After a while, another woman came out on deck. This one was bony and angular, and she wore horn-rimmed spectacles. She spotted the first woman and walked over her, treading the deck in the deliberated, military fashion of all Espinoza. "So there you are," she said. The woman with the fat ankles turned and looked at her, but said nothing. "I've been searching for you," the bony one continued, "searching all over." "It's very odd," the woman with the fat ankles said. "A man dived overboard just now, with his clothes on."
Nonsense. Oh yes, he said he wanted to get some exercise and he dived in and didn't even bother to take his clothes off. You better calm down now, the bony woman said. Her mouth had suddenly become firm, her whole face sharp and alert, and she spoke less kindly than before. "And don't you ever go wandering about on deck alone like this again. You know quite well you are meant to wait for me." "Yes, Maggie," the woman with the fat ankles answered. And again she smiled, a tender, trusting smile. And she took the hand of the other one and allowed herself to be led away across the deck. "Such a nice man," she said. "He wait to me?"
Actually, I like the short story. I like the plot very much because it is funny everything that the man does in the short story. I feel it is a reading that is short and fun.
I really like this short story because I feel identified with volleyball. I am someone that do things without thinking the consequences. This short story was very entertaining and funny.
I usually don't like to read short stories. However, Deep in the Pool is a dramatic and interesting story that has an unexpected ending. I really enjoyed reading the story, since I didn't get bored at any moment and I liked the characters that were showed up, especially the whole Mr. Volleyball's plan and the comic ending that it has, because when imagining the scene I couldn't stop smiling.